Okay, so I'm going to, Jorge's still talking. Jorge just loves to talk. Jorge, you and I...
Minute and a half.
That's right. It's a minute.
First response.
We'll go an extra 30 seconds, right? So this session has as much interest to me as I hope it will have to you. When Pat and I and Todd and I were first talking about the program and what the expectations were, that was not a pun, that was completely by accident. We started to think about the challenges of the people that would attend. How many of you have been or currently are an assistant tennis professional in your life? You've been an assistant pro? I have. Anyone else? Yep. Okay. How many of you currently are or have been a director of tennis or a director of racket sports? Right? My hand up as well. And it's sometimes it's interesting. I kid around. I go into Starbucks and I order a drink, and they write down the name on the cup. And I've had Mike, of course, M-I-K-E. I get M-A-K. I get M-O-K on the. No, it's Mark. And I tell people I hear with an accent too sometimes, right? The reality is, though, that we often see and hear differently the same words. And when I think I think it was Pat, we were talking about the audience, and we knew there'd be a lot of directors, wondered about assistants. We didn't want to say this is not for assistant pros. We talked about what the expectations might be among directors of racket sports and directors of tennis and assistant professionals, and how that sometimes really has a direct bearing on the success of the program and the success of those two individuals, a director or an assistant. So I have had a chance to do a lot of preparation lately. I am starting next month a certified racket sports executive program. It's an education program. It runs for 9 months. And it's really exciting to me because I believe A, it's necessary and valued from the industry perspective, and B, it's really got me charged up and thinking more deeply than I think ever before about what the real needs are at the club level. And you know, I'm looking forward to having a conversation with David Lee, the general manager, here at the end of the presentation today, because clearly needs change and expectations change, and I'm curious about what they are. When I talk to managers and search committees, but predominantly managers, they're expressing a need for a broader executive, business, general management mindset from the person leading their small business. It's a small business. Happens to be a tennis department or racket sports department or a golf department, but it's a small business. So the skill sets, the disciplines are just as important if you're running an ice cream shop than if you're running a swim and tennis or a department in a private country club. So I got to really dive into this, and I guess my point there was this little excerpt on employee, employer, performance management, this whole expectations, is actually an excerpt from one of the presentations and one of the modules that's a part of the executive program. So I'm kind of excited to talk about it and share some thoughts. And what really got me was when I started to dive into expectations, they can be perceived as a good thing and a bad thing. And we're going to dive in and focus on position descriptions and running departments and all of the things that we do every day. But just generally, I looked at two different perspectives as a starting point. That, well, the quote is, expectations are the mother or is the mother of all frustration. The perception there is, you're always going to be frustrated if you set expectations and they're not met. The second perspective is that high expectations are the key to everything. The perception there is you set the expectations and that's where you're going to go. So I thought, again, two completely different perspectives. So I took the first one, expectations, the mother of all frustration. Alexander Pope, blessed is he who expects nothing, for he shall never be disappointed. And who wants to be disappointed? Therefore, I thought, well, maybe as a director or manager, it might be just easy not to get my expectations or my hopes up too high. Because, you know, I'm a happy, positive guy. I don't want to be upset. I don't want to be concerned. But what am I missing out on in that case? Well, I like this quote in particular. And this is around the fact, as the Sam Walton quote originally, that expectations are the key to everything, is that if you treat a man or treat a person as he is, he will remain as he is. But, and I'll paraphrase, if you treat someone the way you expect them to be, they will more likely, should be, and become more that way. So, what do you think? What do I think? How are we going to approach this for the betterment and advancement of our business and our tennis department or our racket sports department? Well, this was my navigation course. As I thought through this, my concept is I've always had high expectations. I hoped to have 2 people in the room that I'd worked with today. I've got 1 person in the room I've worked with, and I was hoping to have 1, but he's off having pizza or something with his parents, I think. KJ's here, right? But I think you've got to have high expectations, and that anything short of that is going to have an impact on the standards. To me, it's the foundation. So how do you deal with the potential frustration of not having those expectations met? Well, in our panel discussion, you heard me say before that tenure or age has a way of maybe softening the edges just a little bit. But I think also having a positive, proactive thought about what am I going to do if my expectations are not met. First of all, are they realistic? Are they measurable? Am I providing the resource? All of the training and development part, we're going to talk about that as well, because I think that's a fundamental part of it. But I think the first step is, if this doesn't happen, how am I going to choose to react to that? Because I have a choice on that. That's the first thing. Having high expectations on myself personally, I think anyone who knows me would suggest that that is reasonably true. But then again, I've got to think about how I'm going to judge myself. And that's another, was it Tim that was talking about the self-talk to yourself? So how you choose to address and deal with your own sets of standards. I am naturally optimistic. I've been criticized for that by some of my very best friends whom I love, and I wouldn't have it any other way. But, and I think actually optimism is a great tool to try and develop. And optimism is not necessarily blind, meaning that if something doesn't work out the right way, maybe it was beyond my control, that's okay. Or maybe there's a lesson to learn, and that's okay as well. So that's the way I've resolved the third bullet point there. What am I going to do if I'm let down? I'm going to look to see if I can control it. What if I fail myself? I'm going to look to see if I could have controlled the outcome. And in both instances, whether it's someone else or myself, I'm going to look for the chance to learn a lesson from that situation. So there we are in terms of navigation. Now, perspective, I always have an interesting, perspective on perspective, because I recognize how different everyone thinks. There's some of us in this room who will claim heritage from another country. I moved from another country. Jorge moved from another country. Alan moved from another country. So I don't know if we are blessed or cursed because of that. But we look at things sometimes differently, not better, not worse, just differently. And I think in our profession, there are also those circumstances where people come from different backgrounds, different cultures. And today, the biggest, most significant difference is age. There's incredible dynamics taking place in our industry with age. Our industry as a profession is aging, graying, they say. The average age right now of a member, I believe, is 52 or 3. the number of young people coming into the industry is shrinking. That puts pressure on compensation for some of the best jobs, which I talk to people like David about. So there's a lot of dynamics around perspective coming into play, and I think that has a big influence on understanding expectations between the various parties. So I tried to patch together, you know, it's interesting when you come up with an idea, then you go look for you know, data points and research material. It doesn't always fit. So some of this is kind of patched together, but the theory basically is I fit right into this old grey hair bald guy category, right? And then you got young bucks like Jim Demos, he fits right in here.
No, I'm with you on the grey bald.
I'm just being nice to you, Jim.
Thanks.
And then we have someone like Tom Davis back here, early millennial. But these folks all live in our work world, in our profession, in our industry, and we've got some challenges there from a perspective. So let's look at what is meaningful to the different generations. We'll start with my old crew. We have a tendency to be idealistic, sort of set in our ways. We like to be recognized. You know, we really were the first group. My dad would never, ever, ever have questioned a supervisor. I made a sport of it. So we were a little, you know, we were changing as the years progressed. And then JD came along and he said, no, I want more balance in my life. I may not be sticking around in the same place as long. Get off my back. Don't micromanage me, not even for a minute. Balance was a big one. And this work-life balance, while our Gen Y here doesn't have it, that is huge. That's not changing. Number one here could be work-life balance. Besides the technology and the diversity, the meaningful work is a big one. So when I start to talk in a minute about coaching your employees or training your employees or even asking them to do things, having meaning behind that is really, really important. When there is pushback, sometimes pushback comes from not understanding. Sometimes it's not having the right tools or being equipped with the skills. Very often it's about not understanding the why. And this is probably the thing I've had the hardest time with in the last, you know, if I've worked for 40 years, then maybe the last 10 or 15, I say, well, you know, you mean why? Just, we need to do it. But that isn't fair, because that's not the perspective from which this generation will see things. And there is also different dynamics with this group in terms of aspirations. You know, the Gen Y wants the freedom and flexibility. The baby boomer wanted the 10-year contract. And I must admit, Rod Delaney helped me very early days. Now, I was accused once of having the best contract in the tennis industry. Isn't that right, Tom? Right? And it was because I was fearful of security. I wanted security, but I couldn't ask for that today because the business, the world has changed. So I'd probably be dealing with a millennial manager, and that wouldn't resonate with that millennial manager. So there's a lot of different things that are coming into play. I thought the communication, and pay attention to this because I am going to talk about this very specifically when it comes to setting expectations. You know, the quill I thought was pretty funny, right? But the telephone and the text messaging and email, you know, email was big. When I started at Dunwoody, my general manager was still typing up Hardy Kroom in DOS. That was in 1994. It's not that long ago. And then we get into the text messaging, social media, handheld devices. This is a biggie, right? And the attitude towards the career, that comes into my world a lot these days. So I just thought it'd be a fun game here to say, who do we know? Okay? And it's too bad. We could actually pick on people who aren't here, which would be a lot more fun. Okay? So I was thinking, who do we know in the workforce that is this guy? The boomer. You know, he's 55 to late 60s. Come on. Tennis director. Racket sports. Director of racket sports. Besides Jorge. Right? Who else? Come on, we got to think. We've got to know people out there in the industry. Right? Come on, think. Dave Dvorak, how old is he?
Yep,
right on the cusp, is he not?
right there.
Yeah. Okay, how about the middle? How old's Matt Grayson in Atlanta? What would Matt be? He'd be in his late 40s,
40s.
right? He'd sit right in there, right?
Todd,
Todd?
he's on the edge.
Todd's right in there. Oh, hang on the Y or
A
the...
little more like the boomer, but
That's right, the boomer.
He's got that kind of rusty beard going on there, right? Right? How about someone in their 20s or 30s? Think of a person that you know and think about how they communicate and how they value their...
Austin Douglas, that's what I just said.
Who's that?
Austin Douglas.
Okay. So think, Tom, as I know you do often, having children in their 20s and 30s myself, how they think, how they react and communicate and value certain things. And the misunderstandings, the communication. So I love this one. Think about this. Let me know as soon as the club president arrives. Okay? I'm not even gonna, this thing just shocked me. Arrives at the club? Arrives at the pro shop? Do you want me to come and tell you? Do you want me to call you on your phone? Do you want me to text you when the club president arrives? Do you want me to interrupt you if you're busy? Do you just want me to give you the thumbs up emoji? Right? So when I say to a certain generation, let me know when the club president arrives, it's not specific enough. Or let me know when the club president arrives at the club, or in the pro shop, let's say. Let me know when the club president arrives at the pro shop. Right? And I need to say, I'll have my phone on me, just ding me. You know, whatever word they use. I look at it, thumbs up, I gotta go. Right? But there has to be specificity. There has to be clear communication and an understanding. And if I get that thumbs up, and all of a sudden I'm out there talking to some people and the club president walks along, so he never told me, right? Well, I didn't check my phone. So whose fault's that? It's my fault. Because I didn't make it clear, nor was I open in my thinking. Expectations. So, we think primarily, we tend to focus on... Sorry, Jack?
Back to your point there, what's funny though, not funny, kind of sad, is like when a baby boomer tries to communicate in the guy with the funky hair in that language.
Yep.
For example,
Yep.
I asked someone a question that probably is mid-50s, and because they have an iPhone, they hit light. So it came over to me on the text like light. So I had to call back like, does that mean yes? Does that mean, I need you to tell me what you're just saying, because when they try to use the same language that's probably there on the technology iPhone, I got lost.
Yeah.
So it's like when you try to talk in another language, it's like, again, if I try to talk in Spanish or something, I might say words, but the sentences don't come together.
Right.
Or it's like, what the heck are you talking about? So the same thing happens when I try to talk another language, and it just
Doesn't gel.
it doesn't jive.
How many of us have ever had a staff meeting designed solely to talk about, what would you call that? We're calling it language. Is there another term for it? Is it jargon? That's an old term too. But what's it called?
I'll just say communication.
Yep.
So,
Just to talk
so we're
about.
all on the same page, and
Yeah.
talking the same lingo.
Yeah.
essentially.
So if I get that, what's that mean?
I didn't know. I didn't.
Yeah.
I didn't know.
You know, but having a time just to talk about that at some pre-arranged or agreed upon time frame? I don't know the answer. So, more to the point, the importance of having A, an open mind, B, a willingness to explore other perspectives. And that's when I think we have a tendency to focus, I call them position descriptions, a lot of people call them job descriptions, but I think these are very, very important. This is very, very important. Yes and yes. I think you need both. I don't know that one exists without the other, or should exist without the other. Definitions? Yeah, there's absolutely. Define the position description talks about the fact that this is stating the purpose of the role. It has all of the things in it that we see, the headings, every time you see, and I sometimes don't agree with this, but you see some of the job listings, duties, responsibilities, report. It's good to have some of that in there, but I want to know, personally, I'd like to know more about the club and the expected outcomes, the expectations. But this defines the role, the title, the reporting structure, the duties and responsibilities. It has a tendency sometimes to be a dust gatherer, the position description, because it's something that has been and always seems to be. It never goes away. It's broad and general. It's mandated in most well-run organizations. It's something that belongs. As I said, it certainly defines the functions, the roles, the responsibilities, clarifies who that person works with, but it doesn't define an outcome. It doesn't have the words so that, blah, 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 finish the sentence. Maintains the area surrounding the tennis courts and the seating, including the seating area and gazebos, so that. What's the so that? It's the appearance. It's the experience when the member comes in, so that the concrete or cemented areas are continually free of clay. The seating area is wiped down, also free of clay or dew in the mornings. The water fountain cup holder is refilled twice a day. Ice is changed morning and night. So that. So the so that is the outcome. So that is the expectation. That's where I think the difference comes between a job description or position description and a performance expectation. The performance expectation, once acknowledged, is an agreement or an understanding, or as the description says, a belief that a certain thing is going to happen, a certain outcome is going to be present as a result of what is being agreed upon. And the key word there is agreed upon. There has to be acknowledgement when you have this performance management scenario where you're asking someone to help you accomplish something. There has to be acknowledgement. Do you understand? Does that make sense? Is there anything that you have questions about? That's the check-in that I was talking about this morning. It's just a check-in. So if you want to arrive at a specific result or a specific outcome, there is a way to arrive. There is a process, I believe, that can be followed to make that likely to happen without challenges. So what are we talking about in terms of performance expectations? Well, it's something that is defined as specific and measurable. That the water and ice is changed morning and evening. 8 a.m., 5 p.m. Measurable and specific. Remember, my favorite new word I learned in Florida at a workshop I attended late last year was specificity. I didn't even know there was such a word. I challenged it. Of course I did. I'm in the baby boom. I said, there's no such word. Yeah, there is. It's what we think is going to happen. What I really like about it is it talks about what we want to have today, what we want our members to experience today. The job description almost goes to the side, because if there's a conflict between the position description and the expected outcome, which way are you going to go? Tom talked about leadership before. A leader is willing to do whatever it takes to accomplish what needs to happen. Whereas the manager, I think, Tom, you said, follows the rules as this example. And while the rules should be consistent with the expectation, if there's ever a doubt, get the job done. We'll go look at the rules later. So that then becomes an underpinning of the performance expectation. Should those expectations occur in a vacuum? No, because the reality of our, I call it the tornadic world of tennis pros. Our world is busy. We've got people coming and going and teaching and calling and asking and complaining and wanting and enjoying. There's a lot happening. So we have a club culture, we have the goals that are in place, we have problematic or PIA members, we have lots of different things that we have to deal with. But at the end of the day, taking all that into account, we want to think about what has to happen today. And if you're in this room and you were an assistant professional or a director of tennis or racket sports, this was what I was talking about, Pat. This was the key of bringing, it doesn't matter which side of that fence or that desk or that role you are sitting on, it's achieving the objective for today. And again, going back to Tom's point, the leader identifies that objective clearly without ambiguity. The challenge I talked about is thinking differently, the perspective of these people. The performance expectations absolutely are about today, and the acknowledgement must take place of what that's going to look like. And for that all to occur, the communication has to be open, it has to be regular, and it has to be all-encompassing. So Chad, you raised a great point. We're both talking the same language, but we don't know what it means. So we've got to have those meetings or sit-downs or walks. Just saw a post with Scott Clyburn from Cliff Drysdale Tennis, and he was doing some meetings, walking meetings. No more sitting around. Loved it, right? So conversations about the language and what everyone is thinking. That's the only way that you can define what's expected, determine who's going to be responsible, and ultimately have a planned, measurable outcome. It sounds easy, right? Should be. No, it's not fair. But it is a process that can be followed. The real leadership, the real leaders, will recognize how to compel, bring along, push forward, cajole, direct, motivate their people to accomplish those goals. With that being said, there's still going to be some times when people fall short, and again, the real leader doesn't ignore it, doesn't run from it. So on that very somber note, let me introduce you to Hampton. Mm-hmm. Now, Hampton looks like the perfect golden retriever. And for about 86% of his life, he is. Hampton is my golden retriever. Hampton is a dog, and every now and again, Hampton doesn't quite meet my expectations. Now, you wouldn't think so. Looks pretty lovely. But my research tells me that the world's greatest dog trainers have a method of dealing with this. And I must admit that I have subscribed to this method and talked about it from podiums before, and I've written about it. They have a method of dealing with Hampton that I think is absolutely appropriate and aligned and fair to both Hampton and people that I might be working with. And it goes something like this. You identify what you want done. Hampton, sit. Good job. Reward. Hampton, lie down. Sorry. Sit. Lie down. Good job. Hampton, sit. No, I said sit. Top of the neck. Boom. Don't hurt the dog. Bring it up. Point being, show the dog immediately what is expected. Immediately. No, Hampton, sit. Good dog. What am I doing? Good dog. What am I doing? Rewarding, praising. Praising, reinforcing. Good behavior, great behavior. Not so good behavior. We're not going to let it go. Hampton, sit. Hampton, sit. Hampton, sit. And then Hampton sits. No. What am I teaching Hampton to do now?
3 times.
3 times. So you don't have to sit Hampton until I say it 3 times. So I wasn't really serious the first time. And the second time I was distracted. I was talking to the tennis captain, the ladies A1 tennis captain. No. These are my expectations. I love you, Hampton. Employee. I love you, Hampton. Employee. But my expectations are my expectations. Why? Because we all have to live in the same house. And I do not want to send Hampton to the doghouse. Employee. Point made. Recognize performance immediately. Reward what you expect. Correct what is unacceptable. Acknowledge change. Provide guidance. Hampton, let me show you. Hampton, down. Under the collar, Hampton, down. Good dog. I can't just tell Hampton to go down. He's like, down, round, what's he saying? But I'm helping Hampton first. I'm coaching Hampton. I'm training Hampton. World's best dog trainers have the best employee management process ever. Delegation is a challenge for a lot of us, and I put myself there in the first person. One of the biggest challenges of delegation, on the right slide, yep, I sure am. What's number 1 on there? Yeah. Shouldn't I just do it myself? Wouldn't it be easier to just do it myself? And then we get a false sense of righteousness. Well, can anyone do it as good as I can? And that will work for a short time, and it will work if you want to work on your own forever, or if you want to turn people over a lot. It will work. You can do it yourself. When people say you can't do it all yourself, you can. You just can't do certain jobs yourself because they get too big. You can't scale or grow because it gets too big. So if you're okay, and I remember walking into a club 25 years ago it wasn't Naples, it was like Captiva Island or one of the places down there. There was a guy, little 4-court facility, and his son at the time was 8, 9, 10 years old, and we were down there for a convention, and we had to go there to play, and I got there first, and he was there with his son. And I remember his name now. He won't mind. I've talked to him about this. His name's Terry C. Remember Terry? Yeah.
Of course.
Yeah. And Terry was there. And I said, Terry, you got like the perfect job. And he did. He loved it. He was on his own. It's a little 4-court facility. His son was able to hang out there. Must have been summer, I guess. I honestly don't remember. But Terry never wanted to do more than that. And he was really good at it. Now, his career is going on now. But you know, as I said this morning, goals and timelines, they're squishy. Things change. Life changes. But at that particular juncture, he was the proverbial clam. The happy ass. The clam. So it just depends on what you want to do in terms of the importance of delegation. In this particular case, I think it's the only win-win for most relationships. The win for the director of tennis: growth, scale, reputation, member satisfaction, program diversity. The wins are numerous for the director. For the assistant, almost as many. Professional growth, learning, resume building, personal, remember the perspective of ages up there? Personal satisfaction in the meaning of their work. So delegation is a really important component here. And I think that it's something that as a director, you really have to be able to focus on. It's a hybrid. It's somewhere in between the position description and the performance expectation. And the reason I say that is, when you delegate, it's unfair. It's unfair for me to tell Hampton to roll over and play dead if he's not prepared and never been helped and never been shown how to roll over and play dead. And he may not have signed up for the dog that was going to roll over and play dead. So he might be in the wrong house, the wrong owner. The analogy loses a little of its steam right here. But if the job description doesn't include helping the kitchen staff with the trash after the Saturday night dinner, and that's your idea of delegation to your assistant professional, one-off scenario, absolutely. Let's get over and help them out because of a need, whatever the need is. But that's not a fair thing on an ongoing basis. But delegation, if it fits within the general purpose of the responsibilities and duties, or as those responsibilities and duties grow because the program is changing and that has been talked about and communicated, I think delegation, as long as it fits into that general job description, it's really a hybrid. And it's something that will be supported by defining what the expectation is going to be. Again, a specific and measurable outcome. And that's where the coaching comes in. The coaching has to come in against those outcomes. It has to be relevant. So again, Hampton said, "Why did you pee on the rug yesterday?" No, I'm talking about sitting right now. So the argument or the conversation, the coaching, has to be against the outcomes that are agreed upon and defined. Now, I talked about a separate handout, and I don't think we did that, and that's fine. I have it on the slide, but I think there are at least 10 specific and sequential steps that are involved in successfully delegating and at the same time training and developing the team or the individual that you're working with. So let's take a look at that. Number one, I've said it half a dozen times, I'll say it again because it shouldn't go away. Clarifying the result. What is the big picture? What is the why of this task or project? Number two, communicating the task. The specificity has to include what has to happen, where it's going to happen. We talked about why. Who's going to be responsible? And the big one that gets left out very often, by when? What is our timeline? The reason or context of the action or the project. This is something that has changed with generations. It's now becoming very often a necessary component of fulfilling the why of the individual. But as you think about the overall context or reason, what's going to be the impact of this action? One of the things I like to think about, if I delegate a task to one assistant pro, and that assistant pro then needs to have an impact of some sort with another member of the staff? Has that been communicated organization-wide? So I come up to Jim and say, Jim, I want you to make sure that we have everything ready for summer camp, which starts on June 1st. We want to do that by April 15th. That includes, and we go through a laundry list, right? Can you get back to me in the next 7 days with status, and we'll check in there. So Jim, who is the head pro, he goes to Chad, who oversees the junior program. All of a sudden, Jim's project, the delegated project or task, is going to impact Chad. Jim comes to Chad and says, Chad, I need your help. Come on, let's go. We're going to... No conversation, no. Jim's responsibility is the same as mine. Mine to Jim is now Jim to Chad. There has to be big picture, context, and as we go through these subsequent steps, each of those steps. That is part of, in my opinion, team building. That's part of coaching Jim, Chad understanding the big picture, and growing professionally. So the delegation tasks have value and benefit across the organization. What success look like? What does that that summer camp program look like? Are we going with a black and white flyer that we're handing out from the desk? Or are we going with a color 3-fold from Overnight Prince? Was it Overnight Prince? Is that what yeah, that was the one you sent me to? That was a chicken dinner, Pat, right? Cheap, and 48 hours later it's in my hand, right? So, hey Jim, check out that Overnight Prince thing. So again, I'm going through this with great specificity once. I could have just left it, summer camp stuff, Jim. You got it? I got it. No clarity, no specificity. Jim's good, we might hit it. Jim may have a bad day, we might not hit it. Much better to have the expectations clear. When I grant the authority, I've said in the staff meeting 2 weeks earlier, because I'm a good leader, gang, we're going to be coming up to summer these next 6 months. We're going to hit the sweet spot April, May, June when we're selling in our summer camp. Jim's going to be heading it up this year. He's going to be working with Chad and our swim team director, and they're going to be putting the groundwork together. They're going to need your help. Everyone on board? Everyone's on board. I've granted Jim the authority in front of the rest of the team that he's got that project. Delegation. It's not asking someone to do something, it's preparing the team for something to happen. Pat?
So I was fortunate a number of years ago to work with the guy that owned a company called The Learning Company. And what they did was he worked with Rubbermaid, AC Delco, Delta, U.S. Post Office, on and on. He had all these Fortune 500 companies, and they had responses on these things of 50,000 to over 500,000 responses. So he had a pretty good idea of where these things should be. And what he taught managers, he ultimately taught managers. They went into these companies, surveyed the employees, had like 50 to 100 questions, and you could graph where the manager's effectiveness was by the way he answered questions. If I'm sick today, my manager, blah, blah, you get an answer of how the empathy is. So what one of his overlying things was, there's 4 quadrants where you delegate something and you manage something. And it goes from new person that knows next to nothing and you have to give them every step, to the other quadrant is experience, knows what they're doing. I just have to tell them give them an idea of what we need done, and they can get it from start to finish. Somebody you may need to check on them each step of the way. Somebody you may need to check on them once. Point being, you've got the 22-year-old kid, you've got Jim Demos as the people that work for you. It is a different delegation, right?
Correct.
I mean, I guess you got to go through all the steps still, especially for you to feel comfortable.
Well, I think the steps can be managed and mitigated based upon the not only the person but the duration of the relationship, the confidence that is there based on past performance, There's certainly, all of those types of, experiential background thoughts that come into play. But I think even a well-experienced veteran who is successful is going to appreciate and respect the announcement to the team. Jim's got summer camp coming up, a check-in that's coming in, 6 weeks in, Jim, good to go, everything, need any help, right? Those types of things might be, the 25 or 30-year-old might be, Jim, let's sit down on Tuesday or Wednesday, what's best for you? Let's just chat about summer camp. I want to see where you're at and if I can help with anything. So different conversations with different people. Yeah.
He said their biggest problem was over-managing the person that knows what they're doing and under-managing the person that needed a lot of help. And sometimes they were firing people because they weren't, it was the manager's problem, not the employee's problem.
I would not doubt that for a minute. I would think that would be, sadly, a common occurrence. Yeah. So as we finish the steps, I think providing the support to the person or the team that you are leading and gaining commitment. And the commitment is, I got it, or I have a question, answer, I got it. But an acknowledgement along the way that this is something that's understood in terms of expected outcome, timeline, and quality. There needs to be the follow-up. What's the outcome at an agreed upon time? And ultimately, where the coaching lives, which is different from training, the coaching lives in an accumulation of outcomes of things over time. Because you finish the junior summer camp, you're moving on to the fall ladies team tennis. But the big picture becomes the coaching, and that's where I'm going to begin to wrap up this afternoon, because now you go from the specific activities and projects to the overall development of the individual or the professional. And I don't know if you have heard this phrase before. I have seen it for years. I always have a chuckle at it. Who do you want on your team? Right? And sometimes this quote is given in the context of money. What happens if I spend all this money on training my staff and they leave, right? Don't spend the money and see what happens if they hang around.
Yeah.
So training is about today, coaching is about the career development for the future. And I believe strongly, some people say I have a vested interest in this, but I really don't. I mean this genuinely and sincerely. I think strategic turnover of staff is a good thing. I think it's something that should be planned for. I think it injects freshness and enthusiasm, and from a member perspective, they mumble and fumble for a day or two, but if you do a great job on that turnover and you embrace someone when they come in, you cheer them on to their growth, and you replace them and cheer on someone just as good or even better, you stay fresh as a director, the program stays fresh, the members feel like they're getting new information. And we all know that tennis is like history, teaching tennis. The story doesn't change. It's how we tell the story. That's what matters. In my time at USTA, I had the pleasure and the valued experience of working with someone who came from the corporate training world. And I'll give her full credit. Her name was Karen Payson, and she came from a company called Unilever. And Karen was a learning and leadership person, and she probably more than anyone was responsible for kind of helping set my path on the value of development, the value of learning. And she shared with me a concept that is titled APT squared. And I thought that was kind of funny because we live in the world of the ATP, which this is not. This is APT squared. And it was about learning and development, and the A stands for acquire. And I thought that as we sit here today after 7 or 8 hours, we have acquired a lot of knowledge. We have acquired a lot of information. I hope we have acquired a lot of enthusiasm to grow and improve. The P stands for practice. And at least from my perspective, having stood here twice today, I've had a chance to practice a discipline that I continue to learn, that I feel that I can continue to get better at. And as you have written, you've started the task of practicing the knowledge and the learning that you've acquired. But you've got to go back now to where you are going to practice your craft and practice what you've learned. So I hope that the information that we've all discussed together, you'll have a chance to practice. The T squared is where the real learning takes place. Because now you get to transfer your knowledge and learning to your job, which is where it counts, to your team members, to the membership. And the value of what we've learned becomes very real in the outcomes. The last component is the coaching or individual development, the second T. So transfer to your job and transfer to one other person. So now, when Jorge goes back to the tennis center, if he picks one person and invests over a period of time the same number of hours, be a lot of hours because you just spent some days at PTR and in Orlando, but all the knowledge you acquire, if you pick 3 different people to transfer that knowledge to from 3 different events, think about the increase of level of performance amongst your team. So, acquire, practice, transfer to your job, transfer to one other person. So, I love to say thank you and that we're finished, which I do. I'll say thank you and we're finished. I appreciate your time this afternoon, and that's all I've got. Thank you. I will, Pat, if anyone has a question, I will answer the question. But I wanted to help you out on the back end of that button. So, all right. Does anyone have any questions before we call it a half day? Banker's Day, right?
Yeah, it's all bank.
All right. Is this topic relevant?
Yeah.
Does it matter? Yeah? Okay, excellent. All right. Thank you, everybody.